Hello, the purpose of this video is to give you the information that you need for the assignment that's called Labeling the Sides of Triangles for Right Triangle Trigonometry. Trigonometry is a topic in math that will come up in every math class that you take after this. And some of the information that we're going to learn today is essential for starting to understand right triangle trigonometry. We'll begin with the review of how to identify triangles that are similar by using the angle-angle similarity theorem. And then the new material will be how to label the sides of triangles for right triangle trigonometry. To begin with, we will review how to tell which triangles are similar by using the angle-angle similarity theorem, which is if two angles of one triangle are congruent to two angles of another triangle, then the triangles are similar. If you're still unsure of what similar shapes are, the informal definition is they are things that are the same shape but not necessarily the same size. The formal definition is that if you have two similar polygons, all of their corresponding sides will be in proportion and all of their angles will be congruent. We're not working with just any polygons in this problem. We're working with triangles, so we will use the special case for triangles, the angle-angle similarity theorem. So which two triangles are similar? Well, when we look at A and B and C, we don't see any pairs of angles that are congruent. So we're going to need to find out the measure of the missing angle in each triangle. So to start out with, for angle A, we're going to take 180 degrees and we're going to subtract off the 118 degree angle and the 40 degree angle. And when we do that, that'll leave us with 22 degrees. So this missing angle here is 22 degrees, and that tells us a lot about our answer already. But we're going to keep going to angle B, or triangle B. For triangle B, we'll take 180 degrees and subtract off the 32 degrees and the 30 degrees, and that will leave us with 118 degrees. So this missing angle here is 118 degrees. Now when we go to triangle C, we don't even need to find the missing angle because angle C has a 118 degree angle and so does angle B. Angle C has a 32 degree angle and so does angle B. So it turns out that triangle B is similar to triangle C by the AA similarity theorem. Now on to the new material. What we're going to do is we're going to look at triangles and we're going to learn some new names for their angles and their sides. And these names are very important when we get to solving problems about missing side lengths or missing angles using right triangle trigonometry. So the first step is to look at the triangle and identify the reference angle. The reference angle will usually be given, and the reference angle is never the right angle. So the first step is to circle the reference angle, and so that's the reference angle in the triangle on the left, and that's the reference angle in the triangle on the right. The second and third step go together. We're going to identify the two sides of the reference angle. So here's one side of the reference angle, there's the other side of the reference angle, and the reference angle is this angle right in here. So those are the two sides of the reference angle. In the triangle on the right, these are the two sides of the reference angle, and so the reference angle is right here. And once we identify the two sides of the reference angle, we're going to label one of them with an H for the hypotenuse. That will be the longer of the two sides, and the other side will be called the adjacent side. So right now in this problem, I'm going to label the hypotenuse with an H and the adjacent side with an A. In the triangle on the right, I'm going to label the hypotenuse with an H and the adjacent side with an A. And then finally, the fourth step is the remaining side will be called the opposite side, and we're going to label that side with an O.
So this side is the opposite side, and in the triangle on the right, this side is the opposite side. So notice that the hypotenuse is the same line segment no matter which angle was the reference angle. But the opposite side and adjacent side switched locations when we switched the reference angle. All right, one more time, a repeat of the same material. If you are looking at a triangle and you need to label it for right triangle trigonometry, the first thing that you do is you circle the reference angle. So in the triangle on the left, there's our reference angle. In the triangle on the right, here's our reference angle. The next step, step number 2 and 3, is we're going to trace the sides of the reference angle. Trace the two sides that make up the reference angle. The longer of those two sides will be called the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is always opposite the right angle. And the other side of the reference angle is the adjacent side. So this is the adjacent side in the triangle on the right. This is the adjacent side. And then the remaining side, after we've labeled the hypotenuse and the adjacent side, the remaining side of the triangle is called the opposite side. And we will label that with an O. So these are the kind of problems that they're going to ask you to do on the homework assignment tonight. We'll start out, and in the problem it tells us that C is the reference angle. So I'm going to circle the reference angle, and then I'm going to highlight the two sides of the reference angle. The longer of those two sides is going to be called the hypotenuse, and the other side is going to be called the adjacent. Then the remaining side is the opposite side of the triangle. So it's very important on all of the homework problems that you find all three sides and label them correctly. Even if the problem is only asking you to find the hypotenuse, you should still label the triangle completely to make sure that you have the right side labeled as the hypotenuse. Oftentimes, students just try to look at the triangle and pick out the hypotenuse, or just pick out the opposite, or just pick out the adjacent, and they make a mistake. So especially when we're first learning to label these triangles, label every side and then answer the question. All right, here's another example. This time it says that A is the reference angle. So I circle the reference angle. I highlight the two sides that make up angle A, or make up the reference angle. The longer of those two sides will be the hypotenuse. The other side will be the adjacent. And then the remaining side will be the opposite side. Here's another example. This time it tells us that C is the reference angle. So I circle angle C. I highlight the two sides of angle C, the two sides that make up the reference angle. The longer of those two sides will be the hypotenuse. The other side will be the adjacent, and the remaining side will be the opposite. This time they tell us that A is the reference angle. So I circle angle A. I highlight the two sides of angle A. The longer of those two sides will be called the hypotenuse. The shorter of those two sides will be called the adjacent, and the remaining side will be called the opposite. In this example, they tell us the 30-degree angle is the reference angle. So I circle the reference angle. The two sides that make up the 30-degree angle are there. The longer of the two sides will be the hypotenuse. The other side will be the adjacent, and the remaining side will be the opposite. In this example, they say that the 60-degree angle is the reference angle. So I circle the 60-degree angle. I highlight the two sides that make up the 60-degree angle. The longer of the two sides will be the hypotenuse. The other side will be called the adjacent, and the remaining side will be the opposite. In this problem, the 45-degree angle that is pulsating is the reference angle. So I circle the reference angle. I highlight the two sides that make up the reference angle. The longer of the two sides is labeled the hypotenuse. The other side is labeled the adjacent, and the remaining side is the opposite. So when you're doing the homework assignment, you need to make sure that you label all three sides and then choose the right answer. Don't just look at the answer choices and try to pick one without labeling the triangle. That is a bad habit, and you will get many wrong answers when you're trying to solve a right triangle trigonometry problem.